Thank you very much, everybody, and it's a great pleasure to be here to talk to the Air Power Conference. I was actually asked very quickly to sort of talk a little bit about the sorts of things that keep us awake at night, the things that really cause us to think deeply about the nature of what we're trying to achieve. And I thought I'd start that by just reminding you all, I'm sure you've all had a chance to read the 2016 Defence White Paper. What the 2016 Defence White Paper did was establish an alignment between strategy, capability and resources that is quite fundamental to the way in which Australia and Defence maintains our military capability edge and prepares for the complex and high-tech conflicts of our future. I want to talk about each one of those elements: strategy, then capability, then resources. Over the last couple of weeks, both the Minister for Defence and the Secretary of the Department have commented that changes are occurring in our strategic environment at a rate quite a bit faster than was anticipated in the 2016 Defence White Paper. Most significantly, we have seen North Korea make faster progress on its ballistic missile capabilities and its nuclear capabilities than was predicted. And we've seen Kim and the North Korean regime show a willingness to endure harsher sanctions than perhaps the world had expected. But that's not the only significant change that we have been seeing over the last couple of years. The threshold for the use of chemical and biological weapons has lowered, as we've seen recently in Syria and in the United Kingdom. These weapons are being employed as both tools of intimidation, tools of assassination, and tools of coercion. And that is something that we haven't seen in our environment for quite some time. We've seen the emergence of hybrid and political warfare, new tools to try and shape the behaviours of states towards interests of others. And we're seeing social media and information operations take on some grand strategic functions, as you would have seen with what has gone on in terms of the allegations of Russian interference in the US elections. All of these sorts of big strategic changes are causing us to ask some fundamental questions about at what point do the pace of change and the sorts of change that we've been seeing over the last little while overtake those fundamental strategic judgments we made in the 2016 Defence White Paper. And perhaps more importantly, is there something in all of this that is changing the nature of war, quite fundamentally? I'll just leave that one and come back to it. Secondly, I'd like to talk very quickly about capability. The White Paper and the Integrated Investment Program that was released alongside it provided a significant increase in Australia's hard power, the ADF's military capabilities and enabling systems to deliver a more capable, a more potent and a more agile future force. Sitting alongside the hard power investments that the government made was a substantial new investment in soft power. Our use of the ADF and the defence capability in international engagement. And this white paper, for the first time, funded and prioritised as a core business for defence the idea of expanded capacity building using ADF resources, particularly in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. These two investments in both hard power and soft power are quite fundamental in delivering on the white paper. But again, we start to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. And in this one, talking about capability, I particularly like to talk about the sorts of technologies you've heard about today that are changing some of the nature of our regional superiority: hypersonic weapons, advanced materials, autonomous systems and artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, augmented reality. All of these things which we've been hearing about over a number of these conferences for perhaps a decade are now starting to reap some real returns in terms of their ability in the military environment. And the fundamental question you've got to ask yourself is, at what point do the very exquisite and very expensive capabilities that we are acquiring in the white paper overtaken in terms of their military comparative advantage by some of those new technologies and new capabilities? This is a fundamental question, and it's one of the reasons why the white paper talked in the section on the future submarines of saying The technologies around ASW, the technologies around AI, about sensors and systems are moving at such a pace that by the mid-2020s to late 2020s, we are going to have to conduct another review to determine whether the submarine technologies that we are constructing in the Future Submarine Project still provide us with the relative advantage that we're looking for, or whether we need to change the configuration to make them more suitable for the future environment. And that's a big investment we're making. The $50 billion we're spending on the future submarine, you have to ask yourself that fundamental question on a regular basis, and it's certainly the case that we do that. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the resourcing that was in the white paper. The 2016 Defence White Paper was the first white paper to be fully costed with external cost assurance of all of the capabilities in the white paper. The government agreed to fund the white paper by increasing the defence budget to 2% of GDP by 2020-21, which resulted in about $195 billion of additional investment over the 10-year period. As you all know, though, technology inflation is impacting upon the costs of military capability. And as our economies return to growth and as new technologies start to emerge, those costs are going to grow. We are probably going to see additional costs incurred in terms of higher labour costs, both in terms of military personnel, civilian personnel and contractors. We are likely to see higher costs in terms of doing business and higher costs in terms of sustaining the force over the long term. In the light of the resource challenges we're likely to see coming forward, the key question we need to ask ourselves is whether we can continue to afford the leading edge of highly sophisticated, exquisite military capabilities, or whether we need to start thinking differently about the nature of our force structure. Those sorts of questions, the fundamental questions about at what point is our strategy overtaken by either new technologies or new methodologies of war, the question about whether our capabilities continue to provide us with the best investment in terms of our military capability advantage, and whether or not we can be appropriately resourced to deal with all of that, are the things that the senior leadership is talking about and considering on a day-by-day basis. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we're all doomed or that it's a particularly dark and bleak outlook. On the contrary, on a regular basis, and the white paper talks about this too, on a 6-monthly basis, the senior leadership sits down with the Minister for Defence to re-examine, based on a formal strategic assessment of our intelligence system, our strategies, our capabilities and resources, and realigns that link between strategy, capability and resources. These 6-monthly reviews are an important part of ensuring that we can maintain the ADF that we need. Since the release of the 2016 Defence White Paper, we've conducted a number of these reviews, and I'm pleased to tell you that to date, we have concurred that the plans are laid out in the White Paper, the capabilities we're seeking to acquire and the resources we need are still aligned. But there is a fundamental question about how long that is going to continue to be the case, and at what point we will need to start thinking about a realignment of those 3 elements of strategy, capability and resources. Thank you.